The morning they fired me began like any other ordinary day, and that is what made it cruel. I woke before dawn, long before the family stirred, when the house was still quiet and cold. I washed my face with water that stung my skin, tied my worn apron, and looked at my reflection in the small, cracked mirror. I remember thinking I looked tired, but I told myself to be strong. I always did. I stepped into the kitchen and began my routine, lighting the stove, preparing breakfast, and wiping surfaces that were already clean. I moved softly, like I always had, careful not to make noise, careful not to exist too loudly. I did not know this would be my last morning in that house. I did not know that by sunset my life would split into two clear parts, before that day and after it. Every step I took felt normal, yet fate was already standing behind me, waiting. I served breakfast with a polite smile, bowed my head when spoken to, and swallowed the quiet heaviness in my chest. If I had known what was coming, I would have breathed deeper, looked longer, and remembered more. But tragedy never announces itself. It simply arrives and takes everything with it. I had worked in that mansion for 6 long years, yet it was never truly my home. I knew every corner of the house, every creaking stair, every mark on the walls, but I never belonged to any of it. I cleaned their floors until my back ached, polished their furniture until my hands cracked, and cared for their children as if they were my own. I fed them, bathed them, wiped their tears, and stayed awake when they were sick. Still, I remained invisible. When the house was clean, no one noticed me. When the children were happy, no one thanked me. But when something went wrong, my name was the first they called. I learned early that silence was my safest place. I swallowed insults, ignored cold looks, and kept my eyes down. I told myself it was only work, that dignity could survive in quiet endurance. I watched their lives unfold from the shadows while mine stood still. They laughed in rooms I cleaned, celebrated in spaces I prepared, and lived comfortably on my exhaustion. Every day I reminded myself that patience was strength. I believed loyalty mattered. I believed effort would be seen one day. I was wrong. To them, I was never a person. I was only a servant passing through a house that would never remember me, until the day they decided to destroy me. That afternoon, everything changed in a single moment. Madame's voice cut through the house like thunder. Her diamond necklace was missing. Before anyone searched the rooms, before questions were asked, before reason had time to breathe, she screamed my name. I froze where I stood, a cleaning cloth still in my hand. My heart began to pound so hard it hurt. I walked toward the sound of her voice, each step heavy, each breath tight. She stood in her room, her face twisted with anger, her eyes sharp and accusing. She did not ask if I had seen the necklace. She did not ask where I had been. She simply pointed at me as if the truth was already decided. Sir joined her, his expression cold and distant. No proof was shown, no drawer was checked, no one questioned the others in the house. In that moment, I realized something painful and clear. My honesty meant nothing. My years of service meant nothing. My character meant nothing. To them, my poverty was evidence enough. I tried to explain, my voice trembling, my words falling over each other. But their minds were already closed. The necklace was missing, and I was poor. That was all they needed. I tried to defend myself, but my voice shook as fear tightened my throat. I spoke slowly, choosing my words carefully, hoping honesty would save me. Before I could finish my sentence, Sir raised his hand and cut me off. His words were sharp and cruel. "You poor people are all the same," he said without even looking at me fully. That sentence struck deeper than any slap ever could. It told me that in his eyes I had never been trustworthy. I had never been equal. I was already guilty the day I walked into that house wearing worn clothes and carrying nothing but hope. Madame turned her face away from me, as if my presence offended her. I stood there, surrounded by luxury, yet feeling smaller than ever. My heart screamed, but my mouth could not move fast enough. I wanted to remind them of the years I served, the nights I stayed awake, the sacrifices I made. But none of it mattered. They had already decided my worth. I was judged not by my actions, but by my status. In that moment, I learned how easily power silences truth. I learned how quickly kindness disappears when money speaks. And I learned that dignity, once crushed, takes a lifetime to rebuild. They fired me without hesitation, without discussion, and without mercy. Madam told me to leave immediately, her voice cold and final. There was no apology, no concern, no acknowledgement of the years I had given them. They refused to pay me my wages, claiming they owed a thief nothing. Sir stood beside her, silent, as if my fate no longer interested him. I was given minutes to pack my belongings. 6 years of work reduced to a small bag of clothes and memories I did not want to keep. Madam warned me not to cause trouble, not to cry, and not to let the neighbors see me. Shame was added to my punishment. As I walked through the door, my legs felt weak, but I forced myself to stand straight. I did not beg. I did not scream. I did not cry. I stepped out into the street with nothing but my dignity, though even that felt fragile. 6 years were erased in 6 minutes. I left behind a house I had cared for like my own, knowing it had never cared for me. That day, I lost my job, my shelter, and my safety. But what I did not know then was this: losing everything would become the beginning of something far greater. I walked out of that house carrying a small bag and a heart that felt heavier than my body. The gate closed behind me with a sound I will never forget. It was not loud, but it felt final, like a door shutting on my past. I stood outside for a moment, unsure of where to go. People passed by, busy with their lives, unaware that mine had just fallen apart. I did not cry. I refused to give them that satisfaction. I held my tears deep inside, locking them away where no one could see. My hands shook as I walked down the street, but I kept my head up. I told myself that if I broke now, I might never stand again. Every step felt like I was leaving a piece of myself behind, yet I kept moving forward. I had no money, no plan, and no place to sleep that night. Still, I promised myself one thing as I walked farther away from that house. They would never see me beg, they would never hear me complain, and they would never know how deeply they had wounded me. In that moment, walking away with nothing, I unknowingly took my first step toward becoming someone stronger than they ever imagined. That night, the world felt colder than it ever had before. I found an empty bench near a closed shop and sat there as the sky slowly darkened. My stomach growled loudly, reminding me that I had not eaten since morning. Hunger twisted inside me like a slow, painful knot, but the shame I felt was even worse. I looked around, afraid someone would recognize me, afraid someone would ask questions I could not answer. I hugged my small bag tightly, as if it were the last thing I owned in the world. The ground beneath me was hard, and sleep came in short, restless moments. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces and heard their voices accusing me. I asked myself if dignity was worth this kind of suffering. I wondered if swallowing my pride and begging would make things easier. But something inside me refused. I had lost my job, my shelter, and my security, but I would not lose my self-respect. As the night dragged on, tears finally came, silent and unseen. I wiped them away quickly and whispered a promise to myself. This pain would not define me. This night would not break me, it would only prepare me. Anger burned inside me like fire the next morning. I replayed everything in my mind, the accusations, the insults, the way they dismissed me without listening. I wanted revenge. I wanted to scream the truth to anyone who would listen. I imagined storming back into that house and demanding justice. But as strong as the anger was, something stronger rose within me. I chose silence. Not because I was weak, but because I knew my rage would destroy me before it ever touched them. I told myself that survival mattered more than shouting. I told myself that if I stayed focused, pain could become power. Every step I took that day felt heavy, but my mind was clear. I decided that my story would not end as a victim's story. I would not let bitterness turn me into someone I did not recognize. I kept my head down, my mouth closed, and my heart guarded. Inside, I made a quiet vow that changed everything. If I survived this, I would rise. Not with noise, not with revenge, but with success so loud it would answer every insult. Silence became my shield, and patience became my weapon. That decision, made in pain, became the foundation of my future. Late that afternoon, hunger led me to a small food stall on a busy street. The smell of cooking made my stomach ache, but I stood there pretending not to notice. The woman running the stall watched me for a long time before speaking. She did not look at me with suspicion or judgment. She looked at me with concern. She asked if I was hungry. Her simple question almost broke me. I nodded, unable to speak. She handed me a small plate of food without asking for money. As I ate, she listened to my story, or at least the parts I could bring myself to share. She did not interrupt. She did not doubt me. When I finished, she surprised me by offering work. It was nothing grand: cleaning, serving, helping where needed. The pay was small, but to me, it felt like a lifeline. That stall became my shelter, my starting point, and my reminder that kindness still existed in the world. That woman did not know it, but she opened a door I thought was permanently closed. In her quiet generosity, I found hope again, small but powerful. I worked harder than I ever had before. I arrived early and stayed late, doing every task with care and focus. I saved every coin I earned, resisting the urge to spend on anything unnecessary. Each day taught me something new. I watched how customers behaved, how prices were set, and how small decisions affected profit. I listened more than I spoke. Pain became my teacher, and discipline became my strength. I learned that survival required patience and planning. There were days my body ached and my spirit felt tired, but I refused to stop. At night, I thought about the future instead of the past. I imagined a life where no one could look down on me again. Slowly, my confidence returned. I stood straighter. I spoke more clearly. I began to believe in myself again. The woman at the stall encouraged me, reminding me that everyone starts somewhere. With every long day, I felt myself growing stronger, wiser, and more determined. I was no longer just surviving. I was preparing. The ground beneath me was still unstable, but for the first time since I was fired, I felt like I was standing again, on my own 2 feet. Failure became my constant companion for a long time. Every step forward seemed to come with 2 steps back. I tried small business ideas that did not work. I borrowed little amounts of money and lost them. Some days, I earned barely enough to eat. At night, I cried alone, quietly, so no one would hear. I questioned myself, my choices, and my strength. But even in those moments, I never allowed myself to quit. I remembered the way they had looked down on me, the cold certainty in their eyes when they accused me without proof. That memory burned inside me like a warning. Giving up would mean they were right about me, so I kept going. I learned from every mistake, no matter how painful it was. Each failure taught me what not to do, how to think differently, and how to grow thicker skin. I became stronger in silence, tougher in spirit. I stopped seeing failure as an ending and started seeing it as training. The tears did not stop immediately, but they began to matter less. I was building something invisible but powerful: resilience. And that resilience would carry me forward when nothing else could. The breakthrough did not arrive suddenly or loudly. It came quietly, almost shyly, after years of effort. My small catering work started getting noticed. A customer recommended me to a friend, and that friend told another. Orders increased slowly but steadily. People trusted me with their events, their celebrations, and their important moments. They trusted my hands, my discipline, and my honesty. For the first time, my name meant something positive. When people called me, it was not with suspicion or commands. It was with respect. I felt something shift inside me. I began to believe that my hard work was finally speaking for me. I reinvested every profit back into the business, improving quality and expanding carefully. I stayed humble, remembering how easily life could change. Each successful event felt like a small victory over my past. I was no longer invisible. I was no longer just surviving. I was growing. That first breakthrough did not make me rich, but it gave me something more important: confidence. It proved that I was capable. It proved that I deserved better. And once that door opened, I never allowed it to close again. As time passed, I began to change in ways even I did not expect. I dressed better, not to impress others, but to reflect how I felt inside. I stood taller. I spoke with confidence instead of fear. People listened when I talked. I noticed it in their eyes. The maid they fired no longer existed. Her silence, her fear, and her shame were slowly fading into memory. In her place stood a woman shaped by struggle and strengthened by discipline. I no longer apologized for existing. I no longer doubted my worth. My voice became steady. My decisions became firm. I learned how to negotiate, how to say no, and how to protect what I had built. When I looked in the mirror, I saw someone unfamiliar, yet deeply proud. Pain had refined me, not destroyed me. Every scar carried a lesson. Every hardship added depth. I had not changed overnight, but step by step, moment by moment. I realized that becoming unrecognizable was not about appearance, it was about identity. I had rebuilt myself from the inside out, and nothing could take that away from me again. Success arrived when I was no longer chasing it desperately. Investors began to notice my consistency and growth. Meetings followed, then contracts. I learned how to speak their language, how to present my vision clearly and confidently. I became a businesswoman, not by title alone, but by mindset. Money began to come, not in sudden floods, but in steady streams. I lived comfortably, not extravagantly. I valued stability more than display. Wealth came quietly, without noise or arrogance. I stayed grounded, remembering where I started and how easily everything could disappear. I employed people who needed chances, just like I once did. I treated them with fairness and respect, knowing how powerful kindness could be. My success was not loud, but it was solid. It gave me freedom, security, and peace. Most importantly, it gave me control over my own life. No one could threaten my survival anymore. I had built something real with my own hands. And with that success came something unexpected, a test of character that would bring my past back into my present. One morning, among business emails and contracts, I noticed a formal invitation. It was for a charity gala. I almost ignored it until I saw the host's name. My breath caught in my throat. It was them. The same family that had fired me without mercy. The same name that once controlled my life now appeared fragile, connected to a struggling company seeking support. Memories rushed back all at once. The accusations, the insults. The day I walked out with nothing. My hands trembled as I held the invitation. I felt no anger, only a strange calm mixed with disbelief. Life had circled back in a way I never imagined. I sat quietly for a long time, staring at that piece of paper. This was not revenge calling me. This was fate asking a question. I knew that attending would reopen wounds, but it would also reveal how far I had come. I finally smiled, slow and controlled. I accepted the invitation, not out of bitterness, but out of strength. The past was knocking, and this time I was ready to answer. Walking into the venue felt like stepping into another lifetime. The lights were bright, the music soft, and the air smelled of expensive perfume and polished floors. I walked slowly, confidently, dressed in elegance I once believed was never meant for someone like me. Every step echoed with memory. Years ago I had walked out of their house with nothing. Now I walked into their world with everything I had built. No one recognized me. I saw familiar faces pass by without a second glance. That gave me strength. I was no longer defined by their memory of me. I was defined by my reality. I held my head high, not in pride, but in peace. Inside, my heart beat steadily, not with fear, but with control. I reminded myself that I owed no one explanations. I owed no one anger. This moment was not about proving anything. It was about witnessing the full circle of life. As I took my seat, I felt grounded. I had survived hunger, humiliation, and loneliness. Nothing in that room could shake me anymore. I was ready for whatever came next. The moment they heard my name announced, I saw it happen. Sir froze where he stood, his confident posture collapsing into disbelief. Madame's smile faded instantly, her face draining of color as if all the blood had left her body. Their eyes met mine, and recognition hit them like a wave. I watched confusion turn into shock, then into something deeper, fear. The room felt suddenly quiet, even though music still played. That silence belonged to us alone. I did not look away. I met their eyes calmly, without anger, without satisfaction. That frightened them more than rage ever could. In that moment they realized who I was. Not the maid they fired, but the woman they underestimated. I saw regret settle heavily on their faces. They wanted to speak, but words failed them. For years, they had lived believing I disappeared into nothing. Now I stood before them as proof that their judgment had been wrong. The power in that realization was overwhelming, yet I remained still. I did not need to say a word. My presence said everything. As the event continued, the host spoke about the importance of support and partnership. Then my role was mentioned. I was introduced as a key investor whose decision could change the future of the struggling company. I felt their eyes burn into me. The truth was now public. There was no hiding from it. I could almost hear their thoughts racing, replaying the past, connecting the dots they never thought would matter. I stood briefly, nodded politely, and sat back down. That simple gesture carried years of meaning. I had once stood in their house begging to be heard. Now I stood in a room full of power where my silence controlled everything. Madame approached me later, her voice trembling as she spoke my name carefully, as if afraid it might break. She tried to explain, to justify, to soften the past. I listened quietly, not because I needed answers, but because I finally could. The truth did not change what happened, but it exposed it. And exposure, I learned, is sometimes more painful than punishment. They apologized without truly saying the word. Their eyes did the talking. Their lowered voices, shaking hands, and forced smiles told me everything I needed to know. Madame spoke about misunderstandings and difficult times. Sir mentioned pressure and stress. I listened patiently, calmly, without interrupting. I realized then that their apology was not for me, it was for themselves. They wanted relief from guilt, not forgiveness, and I understood that. I felt no urge to comfort them. I felt no anger either, only clarity. I saw them as they truly were, flawed, afraid, and human. I responded politely, professionally, and briefly. I did not revisit the past, I did not accuse, I did not defend myself. I simply acknowledged their words and moved on. That restraint gave me strength. I was no longer seeking validation. I had already validated myself through survival. In that moment I understood that healing does not always come from apologies. Sometimes it comes from growth, and I had grown far beyond that room. I had imagined this moment many times during my darkest nights. In those dreams, I was angry and loud. But reality surprised me. I felt no desire to hurt them. Revenge suddenly felt unnecessary. True power, I realized, was standing in front of the people who once broke you and feeling nothing but calm. I spoke kindly, clearly, and firmly. I did not raise my voice. I did not remind them of my suffering. I let my success speak for itself. They waited anxiously for my decision, hoping for mercy, fearing judgment. That was the balance of power. And I held it quietly. I understood then that revenge would have given them control over my emotions again. I refused that. I chose dignity. I chose peace. That choice was not weakness. It was freedom. I had already won by becoming someone they could no longer ignore. Anything more would only cheapen that victory. Power without revenge is rare, but it is the most satisfying form of justice. When the moment finally came for my decision, the room felt heavier than before. All eyes were on me, waiting, hoping, fearing. I could feel the tension in the air, but inside me, there was calm. I had already made peace with the past long before this night. I spoke slowly and clearly, choosing words that carried truth without cruelty. I explained that every investment I made was guided by values, not desperation or emotion. I said I believed in fairness, respect, and integrity, and that those values mattered more to me than profit. I did not mention the past directly. I did not accuse them. I did not remind them of the day they fired me. I simply said that my principles did not align with their leadership. That was all. My voice did not shake. My heart did not race. This was not revenge. This was clarity. I saw the realization settle on their faces. They understood what I was saying without me saying everything. In that moment, I felt free. I was no longer reacting to my pain. I was acting from strength. Saying no felt powerful, not because it hurt them, but because it honored me. After that night, I did not stay to watch what happened next. I did not need to. Regret has a way of unfolding quietly, without noise or audience. I later learned that investors hesitated, deals collapsed, and confidence in their company continued to fade. But what hurt them most was not the financial loss. It was the realization. They finally understood that the maid they dismissed so easily had been loyal, honest, and hardworking. They understood too late that character cannot be replaced as easily as staff. Regret sat with them in meetings, followed them home, and kept them awake at night. It was not something I caused, it was something they earned. I carried no joy in their struggle, I carried no bitterness either. Life had simply balanced itself. Choices always come back, sometimes gently, sometimes harshly. This was their lesson. Mine had already been learned. I moved forward without looking back, knowing that regret is one of the heaviest burdens a person can carry. And once it arrives, no amount of apology can make it leave. Walking away from that chapter of my life felt different from every other departure I had known. Years ago, when I walked out of their house, I was broken, scared, and uncertain. This time, I walked away whole. My steps were steady, my breathing was calm. I felt no tightness in my chest, no anger pulling me backward. I had faced the past and stood taller than it. That alone was victory. I realized I no longer needed validation, apologies, or recognition from them. I had already proven everything to myself. The strength I carried now came from surviving hunger, humiliation, and loneliness. It came from building something out of nothing. As I walked into the night, I felt gratitude. Not for the pain, but for the growth it forced upon me. I understood that healing does not mean forgetting. It means remembering without bleeding. I was no longer defined by what was done to me. I was defined by what I chose to become. And that realization made me feel complete in a way success alone never could. The most powerful lessons of my life were never taught with words. They were written in silence, carved by hardship, and sealed by time. I learned that kindness should never be mistaken for weakness. I learned that silence can protect you when anger would destroy you. I learned that patience, though painful, always reveals truth. Most of all, I learned that people show their true character when they hold power. These lessons guide every decision I make now. They remind me to treat others with dignity, no matter their position. I employ people who need chances and protect them the way I once wished someone had protected me. I never forget where I came from, because forgetting would make me no better than those who looked down on me. Life tested me harshly, but it also shaped me carefully. I do not fear being underestimated anymore. I welcome it, because I know what quiet determination can build over time. These lessons stay with me, not as wounds but as wisdom. The day they fired me, they believed they were removing a problem from their house. They never imagined they were planting the seed of their greatest regret. That day took everything from me, my job, my shelter, my sense of safety. But it also gave me something priceless. It gave me purpose. It taught me resilience. It forced me to rise. They fired a maid without mercy, without proof, and without compassion. Years later, they faced the consequence of that choice, not through revenge, but through reality. I did not destroy them. Life did. I simply survived long enough to witness it. That is the truth of this story. Pain can either break you or build you. On that day, they thought they ended my story. Instead, they began theirs. And that is why the day they fired the maid became the day they created their biggest regret.